This is the other map, and if Oceania is a new concept to you, you're in luck, because we're going to try and give you an introduction to this gigantic region. You can find deeper dives on individual countries, etc. elsewhere, but in this video, we're going to lay out the basics. Now, if you have a connection to the region, pay close attention to world news, or are a geography freak, you may be familiar with the Federated States of Micronesia, Tokelau, and Wallis and Futuna. But if you haven't heard of any of those, well, you're not alone, which is unfortunate because there's a lot going on in the region they inhabit. For example, the United States and China are currently jockeying for position there, trying to build military bases, and there have been no shortage of consequential elections in the area in recent years. One story that is currently unfolding concerns the French colony of New Caledonia. This territory has been in the news recently because there has been conflict between the indigenous groups on the island who want their land rights back and the groups that benefit from French occupation, who would prefer the status quo. Yes, there is a battle for colonial rule happening in 2024 and a lot is at stake, from New Caledonia's nickel mining industry to the territory's extreme biodiversity to France losing a military foothold in the region. But the struggle in New Caledonia doesn't get a lot of airplay worldwide. This is partially due to, well, the current overdose of conflicts globally. I had another account of mine muted because of posting about the most contentious fight currently raging, but beyond that there's the conflict in Sudan, the grinding war in Ukraine, the situation in Ethiopia, and the looming prospect of civil war in the United States, among a thicket of other global problems for people to worry about, discuss, and take action over. But still, why isn't New Caledonia in that mix? I would guess it's because New Caledonia is very, very small. Its overall landmass is less than 1/100th the size of Sudan, and Sudan's population is 185 times larger. Now, does that make New Caledonia's struggle less important? Absolutely not. Does it mean the news corporations weigh other conflicts as being more newsworthy? Sadly, that's likely the case, and that is definitely par for the course for the neighborhood. That's because we're talking about the region named Oceania, which can be divided into 4 sections. Although that's a little complicated for our purposes, so I'm going to leave that part out. Oceania is smacked up against Southeast Asia and has the Americas to its east. In short, it's a big collection of islands of various sizes in the Pacific. The region's greatest hits include the sunburned continent of Australia, the United State of Hawaii, Easter Island, the one with the huge stone heads that belongs to Chile, Fiji, which is supposedly the source of that brand of water, New Zealand, which is pretty and has that funny accent, and the aforementioned New Caledonia, which is in a very not funny situation. All told, around 52 million people live in the region, which is roughly the population of the United States East Coast metropolitan area. This population is spread out over a total landmass a little smaller than the United States, with a whole lot of water separating everything. And if you take Australia out of the equation, Oceania has around half as many people and 1/7 of that land. The place is sparse, which is part of why it's so amazing. Unlike most parts of the world, where you could walk or ride horses for long distances, before flight, Oceania was only accessible via boat. And at the time the region was settled, there were no GPS instruments or satellite imagery. Think about that. How would you navigate across a giant ocean between tiny islands when the curve of the earth makes those islands impossible to see? Well, it's definitely not magic, but supposedly a number of the Polynesian navigational techniques that made this travel possible have been lost to modernity. The techniques that did survive involved the stars, currents, storms, clouds, and wind, among other environmental factors, and make a great case for the seafarers of Oceania being the greatest the world has ever seen. And why do I say this? Well, it started in Hawaii, which was supposedly first inhabited by the Polynesians around the year 900, over 1,000 years ago today. 200 years before that, they were settling the Marquesas Islands, while 1,500 years before that, they landed in Samoa. 500 years before that, they landed in the Solomon Islands. 200 years before that, they had gotten all over Southeast Asia, and the starting point for the entire ethnic group was supposedly Taiwan 5,000 years ago. Now you might be saying, wow, it took them 5,000 years to get from Taiwan to Hawaii? That's an 11-hour flight. Well, the kicker is that these weren't people moving between known points. In my understanding, they were navigating without a destination, using clues in the ocean itself to figure out where unknown land was. I don't know if the stories of navigators steering boats naked to literally feel the currents of their testicles are true, but I don't doubt it. Something special was happening on those boats. I mean, we're talking about a culture that easily could have reached the Americas from Easter Island. In fact, it's possible they did, but that's mostly theoretical. There's also a sizable group of Polynesians in Madagascar off the coast of Africa, but I'm not sure if they stopped in pre-existing ports to get there. If you have the 411 on that, please comment. Now, this navigational culture isn't just history. If you're interested, you should check out the website of the Polynesian Voyaging Society, which is a Hawaiian group that is keeping these traditions alive. Donate some money while you're there because they're doing important stuff. Link in the description. Speaking of the region's people, in the same way that Europeans and Middle Easterners have some small amount of Neanderthal DNA mixed in with their human genes, the indigenous inhabitants of Australia and Papua New Guinea share bits of DNA with the third species of humans, which I believe is pronounced the Denisovans. Not much more to say there, but that's pretty trippy. Not as surprising would be the barbaric treatment given to people in Oceania by European powers like France, England, the Netherlands, the United States, and Germany. You could definitely make the case that the well-known events surrounding colonization in the Americas, genocide, disease, land dispossession, oppression, also happened in Oceania, just on a smaller scale. After all, tropical plantations remain common in the Pacific as well as the Caribbean. Unfortunately, as mentioned in the intro, Oceania may just lack the population and size to make the world pay appropriate attention. Another foreign incursion into Oceania saw major World War II battles in the region, mostly between the United States and Japanese forces. These completely upended life in the area and saw a lot of destruction all over the region. We don't really talk about war on this channel, but I'm going to put a link in the description to a video on this violent time in Oceania's history. A very, very different tragedy is unfolding in 2024. In the same way that Chinese tea culture was bastardized into British tea bags served with cream, or Native American tobacco became cigarettes, or Oaxaca medicinal mushrooms became a hallucinogenic street drug, we are currently seeing a new mind-altering substance emerge in forms far from its origins, and that origin would be the Oceanian practice of drinking Kava, a practice that seems to have spread with the navigators of days past. A friend of mine with roots in Fiji told me that his relatives knew of Kava as being a part of a ritual you would undertake when visiting an outlying island in that country. You had to drink Kava with the elder or chief of that island for things to go smoothly. Which makes sense. As with alcohol, drinking Kava with company can be a bonding experience. Well, the way the drink is consumed in Kava bars, a type of intoxication establishment spreading quickly throughout the world, isn't much like that. But that's not the specific problem I'm talking about. At issue is a number of brands trying to sell a new sort of nameless drink that's like beer but without the hangover. I'm sure you've seen the ads. What they're selling is Kava. If this turns into Kava farms taking up space throughout Oceania and everything turning sideways with Kava culture, that would suck, because legit Kava drinking seems like a pretty holy thing. But the biggest issue facing Oceania today is that, well, some of the islands are going to be missing from the map soon. Climate change is going to affect the region greatly, potentially putting many islands in the region underwater. One group that advocates for countries with these issues, the Alliance of Small Island States, a lobbying organization that operates within the United Nations, includes 15 Oceania nations among its 39 member states. Tuvalu, a nation that will be especially affected by climate change, is slowly evacuating its people to Australia at a rate of 280 citizens a year. That may not sound like a lot, but the country only has a population of around 12,000. Tuvalu is also constructing a digital version of itself to preserve its culture, an undertaking which is admirable. Needless to say, rampant factory and construction missions in support of uncontrolled capitalism is something that should have stopped a long time ago, but they're still going, and many of us, especially in more developed countries, share the blame. And on that guilt trip note, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. You know where the buttons are, and be sure to check the comments for corrections. Also, please let us know if we got anything wrong. Peace out.